Hello, this is Kevin, and I'm here to teach you how to set up a Blender scene to work with the Auto Asset Maker plugin. Before we get started, there's a few things you're going to need. All of them will be linked down in the description. You will need Blender version 3.1 or higher. We recommend using the Steam version of Blender. That one will automatically update for you. You will need the plugin itself. We also recommend using FBX Converter 2013. And you will need some way of opening Brawl files, so Brawl Crate or Brawl Box, but we recommend Brawl Crate. When you unzip the plugin download, there will be a default scene and the plugin file. When you open the default scene, it will look like this. There's a few things we have to do in here before we get started. Go up to Edit, Preferences, then in the Add-ons tab, click the Install button in the top right. Open the PY plugin file included in the download, install that, and then give it a second. Once it actually installs, you'll see it'll pop up right here. So just click that box to enable it. There's one more plugin we're going to install. This one comes included with Blender. It just isn't enabled by default. The Copy Attributes menu, you just search for copy, it'll pop right up. Just make sure that box is clicked as well. And then the last bit of setup we're going to do is in the properties panel here, go to the output properties. Here in the output tab, we are going to specify the output file. So pick whatever folder you want the images to be sent to, and then click accept. And then in this typing panel here, just name it whatever you want the output to be named. So I'm just doing Mario, and then we also recommend including an underscore at the end of it. That's so the CSP and HD and all of those little sub tabs get added after an underscore instead of just being squished right against whatever you type. So from here, there's either two ways of setting up the scene. You are either adapting a pre-existing scene to work with the plugin, or you're starting over from scratch. I'm going to go through both. I'll go through starting from scratch first, but here's a timestamp if you're just adapting an existing scene to work with this new plugin. So if you're starting from scratch, open up the character file you'll be using in Brawl Crate. We will right-click the model itself, export it. Save it to whatever location you want it to load from. Just make sure it's a DAE and not an MDL0. Click Save. Then we're also going to export all of the textures, so right-click Export All, and put these in the same folder as the model. That way Blender can automatically associate them. Save them as a PNG, so transparency is good. And that's all we need from this. Then open FBX Converter. Click this Add button here. Click your DAE file. And then in the bottom right, click Convert. This will convert the DAE to an FBX, and the FBX just holds onto more data like sharp edges and stuff. It'll make the model look cleaner at the end. Now back in Blender, we will file import FBX, and then load your FBX file here. Just click Import. Then you'll see the armature pop in on the right here. Click that. And then on this scale everything to 0.2. The exact size will kind of depend on the character model and the camera settings you use, but 0.2 is typically a good starting point. I'm going up a little bit higher, so looks like 0.3 will be good for me. Now if we come here and open the sidebar panel, you can do this with N as well. This is the plugin. There's a few handy little things with this. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to select all of the meshes. So right click on the armature, select hierarchy. And then up at the top here, you're able to actually override specific values for all of the materials. You can see here you have options for the blend mode, whether backface culling is enabled, the metallic value, and the roughness value. So you can set those to whatever you like, and then whatever objects you have selected, when you click Fix Materials, those material settings will then be applied to that object. There are still going to be some tweaking you're going to have to do. We're not going to go over polishing in this video, but if you look at pre-existing render scenes, you can get an idea of some recommended material settings. And then once you have the model in the file, you're able to pose and edit it and polish it and get it all set up for the render. So that's how you work from a model from scratch. Now, if you are adapting an existing scene to work with the plugin, if you are not using the Steam version of Blender, within the blank scene, go to File, Append, and then you'll want to navigate to your existing scene. Click that blend file, go down to Objects, and then you will want to add the armature, the camera, any lights that you have in that scene, and then also the objects for the model. Just select all of them and then click Append. If you are using the Steam version of Blender, you can just open up the existing scene in that same Steam version. You're going to select everything. So make sure, again, all the meshes, the camera, and the lights are selected. Then you can just copy those, Control C, and you can paste them in over here. And now, if you wanted to use the lights from your existing scene, they'll go in the render collection by default. So if you wanted to keep those, delete the lights included in the scene render. Those are the ones that come with the default scene. I'm going to use those lights to show them off, so I'm going to delete the ones I imported. And let me take a look. So this we don't need. I'm not sure where that came from. And now we are going to set the plugin's cameras to be at the same position as the old scene's camera. So we're going to select the render camera included in the scene collection. Then we're going to shift, well, if you are working in the viewport, you will shift click the other camera. If you select it in the collection menu over here, you'll control click. And then once you have both those highlighted, hit Control C. You want to copy the location, and then Control C again, copy the rotation. And what that does is that lines up the render camera for the plugin with the camera you imported from the existing scene. So now we can delete that camera. And now I kept the lights from the default scene, and the render camera is at the same location and position as the existing scene. So now if we open the sidebar here, you can also open that by clicking N. You will see this here. This is the actual plugin. All right, so now that we have the model imported, we can actually get started on setting it up. The first thing you're going to want to do is decide what meshes you want to show up in which renders. Typically, the stock will have quite a different setup compared to the full render for the CSP and the BP. So for Mario's case here, we just want the head and the hat in the stock. So I am going to select all of the head objects that I want in the stock, and then I'm going to click M, and I will move those to the render and stock collection. And then the body objects here, which we just want to show up in the render itself, they are already in the main render scene, or the main render collection, excuse me. So those we can leave there. And now once you have the objects in the collect scene, you should notice there are a few empties included over here. Those are very useful. Those are keyframed already to show up and disappear depending on which camera is active. So what you're going to want to do is select all of your meshes within a given collection. Then select the empty. Again, if you're selecting it in the collection, you'll use Control click. Then you're going to press Control L, and you want to link the animation data. And you will do that for all of your objects. So here, the render and stock ones, we're going to select that. And then animation data, you'll notice this one is called reset keyframes. Since these objects show up in the render and the stock, they actually aren't keyframed. I still recommend linking the animation data just to make sure. And just for the sake of the tutorial, I'm going to show off a different hat if you wanted a different stock object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hat, I'm going to move it back to the render. I'm going to link that keyframe. And then I'm going to duplicate this with Shift D, and then I will move the duplicate to the stock. You'll notice right now the stock keyframe, I can't select it. If I Control L, it won't let me do anything. So that is where this panel starts to come in. So you can see down at the bottom here, we have BPHD, CSPHD, render, and STC. These are all the cameras. So this left button here, this one will control which one you're previewing in the viewport. And you can see here, when we activate the stock one, we just have Mario's head, which is just what we want, but the hat didn't show up. So now that we have the stock one selected, we can select the hat and the stock keyframes, and we can link that animation data. That didn't work. I know why that didn't work. That didn't work because the object was keyframed, so we can select it. So we will reset those keyframes, then we'll go to the stock, and then we'll select both of them, and then we'll link the animation data. So now everything shows up the way that we want. As far as the stock goes, for this one, I'm just going to show changing a material. So go click on the hat, click on the materials property, and then if you click this little number here, that will create a unique existence of that material. Before, if we had made an edit to this material, it would change it on the default hat too, but now this object has its own. And just for the sake of the tutorial, I'm gonna just add a color ramp here, just to make the hat black and white, just so we know it's different. Typically what you would do is you would create a stock texture in an external program like GIMP or Photoshop, and then you'd click this file here, save it with a different name, and select the stock texture. I'm just keeping it simple. So now we have a gray hat on the stock and red hat everywhere else. So now for the setting up the cameras itself, the first thing you want to do is decide what resolution you want the main render to be. We recommend doing 1500 by 1500. The square leaves least amount of empty space trying to be rendered, and it'll fit most characters well. Doesn't need to, if you want it to be higher resolution, you can, that's up to you. But if you want to change it, select the render camera, click this little X here, and then higher up here, there's this dimensions tab. Change this to the values you want it to be. So this one is the width, and this one's the height. So I'm going to set those back to 1500. And then once you have that set, make sure you save the custom resolution here. So now you'll notice we have the resolution saved, but it's like really zoomed out. That's what these setting controls are for. The focal length, that is the zoom. The shift here, that's the horizontal position. And the V here, that is the vertical position. So now we have Mario nice and big and centered in the scene. These two values, this is when clipping would start and when clipping would end. You typically won't need to adjust these, but just in case you'd want to, they're included there as well. Over on the left here, you can see we have a preview of what the final output would look like. And now that we have the main render camera set up, if we go to the CSP camera, now we can zoom in with this one, position this the way that we want it, and then you just repeat this process for all the cameras. So the BP, we'll zoom in with this, and you'll notice the cameras for the other assets are already at the correct scale and proportion for the asset they should be. And then the stock, we'll zoom in quite a bit. Make sure you leave some empty room around the stock. You don't need a ton, but you do need there to be a little bit, just so that way when the plugin adds the outline, it can do so without clipping. And now I'm going to open up the output path for where I told Blender to add it to in the output properties here. Oh, that didn't save. I am glad I checked that. So Mario underscore standard test underscore. Oh, don't want that backslash. And then once you have all of the cameras set up, you can see here that the output folder is empty. If we just click this render all crops button, it automatically created all of the assets for us. We have the render, the CSP, the CSP HD, the BP, the BP HD, and then the stock and the stock HD, all with outlines, all with the specific object set up the way that we wanted. And that's pretty much it. I am going to showcase one quick thing. Let's say you made an edit to the stock head and you need to re-render it. Instead of clicking the render all crops button, if you just click this little triangle square circle button, that will render just that specific camera and it'll update only those two. So none of these rendered and just the stocks got updated. And that should be everything. So hope you enjoy. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out on Discord and have a good night.